The claim of fact that I will be responding to is that animal testing involving medical and medicinal research is necessary in order to increase the standard of living not just for all humans, but other animals as well. The supporting claims I will be addressing to prove this main claim as defective are, first, that animal testing enables scientists and researchers to gather data that they would otherwise have no other way of gathering. Second, animal research and testing can lead to important discoveries about the potential harms and side effects of chemicals that people may come in contact with and help develop treatments for such harms. And finally, how animals provide a more versatile and plentiful subject sample than testing on humans. First, animal testing enables scientists and researchers to gather data that they would otherwise have no way of gathering. In this first claim, the example of scientists conducting experiments on mice in order to alter or change medication to make it less harmful to humans depending on how the mice react to the medicine is used. This argument is proved fallible with two examples. First, when called upon to speak at a press release on how to make clinical drug development more effective, Mike Leavitt, Secretary of Health and Human Services, declared that currently 9 out of 10 experimental drugs fail in clinical studies because we cannot accurately predict how they will behave in people based on laboratory and animal studies. Secondly, PETA, People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, released an article on their website, www.peta.org, announcing the top 5 shocking animal experimentation facts, the fifth one being that 92% of experimental drugs that are safe and effective in animals fail in human clinical trials because they don't work or are dangerous. Both of these examples demonstrate the lack of success that has occurred when using animals to research medicine. Also, he states that mammals are crucial in the development and treatments for diabetes, HIV, and human cancer. However, never does it clearly state what kind of mammals are used, what tests are being conducted, or what evidence points to this assumption. The next claim that I will be discussing is that animal research and testing can lead to important discoveries about the potential harms and side effects that people may come in contact with and help develop treatments for such harms. In this claim, the argument is made that MSG had been tested on rats, which proved that it was a direct cause of obesity and increased appetite, and that the studies conducted on these rats caused food production companies to stop putting the MSG additive in their food. However, there is no known source or evidence that proves this as true. Also, the idea that MSG is a direct cause of obesity is questionable. In a New York Times article that came out in September 2011, the cause of diabetes was stated by Dr. Gortmaker, a sociologist at the Harvard School of Public Health, that the marketing of food and beverages is associated with increasing obesity rates and is especially effective among children. Very few children are born obese, but most American children grow up in an obese environment. The article goes on to conclude that many environmental forces, from economic interests of food and beverage industries to the way our cities and towns are built, have conspired to subvert the body's natural ability to match calories in with calories out. This proves that MSG is not always the cause of obesity. Lastly, animals provide a more versatile and plentiful subject sample than testing on humans. In this argument, insufficient examples prevent the argument from being true. The points in the argument include a lack of amount of volunteers coming forward to offer themselves to human testing. This point excludes any other vital measures that may be taken to receive the same information or research from a different manner. For example, in an article posted by PETA, the organization investigated that 95% of medical schools across the United States replace the use of animal laboratories in medical training with sophisticated human patient simulators, virtual reality systems, computer simulators, and supervised clinical experience. The American Medical Student Association now states that it strongly encourages the replacement of animal laboratories with non-animal alternatives in undergraduate medical education. This is a possible opportunity that may be taken in order to diminish the need for animals and humans to be required for research and experiments to obtain critical information. Also, the claim states that the animals could be specially bred for testing, which can increase the sample size and allow scientists to find more accurate results. However, an article posted online found on ehow.com reveals the dangers that genetic breeding creates, stating that selective breeding often requires inbreeding of animals and plants. This decreases genetic variety in the gene pool and causes the organisms to express similar susceptibility to specific pathogens. If a group of genetically similar animals or plants is attacked by a certain pathogen, Genetically similarity increases the likelihood that the whole population will be vulnerable to disease. Therefore, unless carefully monitored, selectively bred populations are constantly in danger of being wiped out by disease. This information provides a negative viewpoint on breeding and reveals the possible dangers that may arise. In conclusion, based on the lack of evidence and citation, there is no possible way to establish that animal testing involving medical and medicinal research is necessary in order to increase the standard of living for not just all humans but other animals as well is a credible claim. Based on the newly presented evidence and studies, a clear depiction that the claim is flawed and untrue is presented. Sorry about my voice.
All right, you label the advocate's points. I think that you sometimes go into too much detail on those, and because the advocate's points were a little elaborate, you kind of fall into the same trap, and so as a consequence you spend a lot of time on those things. You can often summarize the points very clearly with a single sentence and then tell us what your responses would be, and I think that that would be fine. Your labeling on the points was pretty good. I think that you had a good piece of statistical information early on that I would be careful about the source on, because although PETA is a source that's rich in information, they're also a source that's easily attacked because of extremist positions and because of the biases that they have. So you might want to see, for instance, if 92% of the research in animals doesn't produce an outcome, that information's got to be available from other sources, and relying on PETA, I think, just makes you a little bit more vulnerable in that situation. On the phrasing, on the second point, that's another one of those things that I think you get complicated with the whole thing on the phrasing. The MSG thing, I think you have a reasonable challenge there that the advocate didn't really present any evidence on that, and then you present counterclaims, so that's a pretty good answer on that point as well, and I thought you did okay on that argument. On the third argument, we're back to some more statistical information from PETA. Again, I'm sure that that's available someplace else. I think that would be good. And remember, it is in academic institutions, not experimental institutions, so it's a little bit different, but I do like the idea that they have tried to replace these with other alternatives. I do think that you make an argument right at the end that's a little bit problematic when you talk about the crossbreeding, because your argument basically is that that would be a danger to the animals that are being bred, but in essence the evidence that you present is the exact reason that the advocate says that we need to have animals, because we can create these vulnerabilities, we can make them subject to experimentation and change and those kinds of things. And they're not saying, and then we're going to turn them all loose to breed with all the wild rats or whatever it happens to be, but rather that we can use them in these particular populations. So I think that your argument there is not really relevant to the point that's being discussed here, but maybe somebody would miss that. It might be worth making the argument, although I don't think that anybody who's listening closely would be fooled by it. All right, thank you.